thanks again for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and kind of share your story. And I'd love for you to kind of introduce yourself to our audience, and we'll go from there.
Thanks so much for having me on. My name is Hannah Dodd. I'm an Australian wheelchair basketballer. I am a two-time dual sport Paralympian. So I did London 2012 for equestrian and then Tokyo 2021 for wheelchair basketball. I play in both leagues here in Australia, in the men's and the women's, and I've been playing professionally in Europe for the last 2 years.
Oh, well, you play professionally. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was an adventure that we were going to undertake pre-COVID or during COVID, and then COVID happened and everything kind of got put on hold for a little bit. And then obviously we came out of COVID and went straight into Tokyo, and then for me, Commonwealth Games with the 3x3 wheelchair basketball. And then yeah, pretty much straight from Com Games, we went into our first professional contract with myself and my partner because we both play. So yeah, we're looking at our third season in Europe come September. So yeah, spent 8 months overseas, and then 4 or 5 months here in Australia, and kind of just been doing that on rotation for the last couple of years.
That's really exciting. I was not aware that there's professional leagues. That's really cool. How'd you get involved in that?
As I said, it had always been something that I had wanted to do, and that had been on the cards for both me and my partner to do at some stage. And basically, we just put an ad up on IWBF Europe, which is like our international association, saying we were looking for a club. And yeah, that was it. And got a couple of interests and a couple of offers. And our first season, we played in Italy. And then last season, we played in Germany.
Okay. Do you kind of travel between the European countries and play for the specific team, or how does it work?
Yeah, so the first season was like playing in the Italian league, and we did some Euro Cup stuff as well. Sorry, I'm just trying to keep my dog from
No,
from
you're
joining
fine.
us. He's just come in from the paddocks and he's very excited to say hello. Um, yeah, so our first one was in Italy, playing in the Italian Series A, which is like their top division, and then our second one was in the German Bundesliga 1, which again is their top division. And we're hopefully going back to the Bundesliga this year.
That's fantastic. That sounds really awesome. And I'm sure it works out best since you and both your partner travel together and play together.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot more fun having someone there. And actually, going to Europe was the first time we'd actually played on the same team together at a really high competitive level. Because prior to that, we actually played for different teams in Australia, so we were always playing against each other.
Uh-oh.
So
How
it
they're a
was
big
nice
rival in
to.
the house when you guys play against each other?
Yes and no.
Okay.
We had a couple of years straight where both of our teams were in the grand final, so that would definitely brought out some competitiveness. But yeah, no, we've always um, been competitive, and we have basically no. We're not friends on court. Is kind of the rule. If we're playing against each other, we can be friendly, but we've got to be competitive as well. So it was a nice change to not have to, to play against him instead and play with him.
That sounds fantastic and fun, by the way, especially since you guys get to do it together. How did you kind of get started into wheelchair basketball?
uh, it sounds a bit like a bad soap opera, but I actually got recruited via my parents in a casino
Do
during the
tell.
uh, during the opening ceremony of London Paralympics. Because Equestrian had been one of the last teams to be announced, my parents couldn't get tickets for the opening ceremony, so they went and watched it in the casino over the road from the stadium on the big screen, and were obviously decked out all in Aussie gear and stuff like that. And one of the former Australian coaches, Jerry Hewson, was in the same in the same casino, and obviously spotted them from a mile away, decked out in green and gold, and came over and introduced himself and said, "Oh well, as a horse rider, she'd have great balance," which is not true. I have great balance on a horse. Anything else, no. Um, and yeah, it was just like, oh, would have great balance. She should try wheelchair basketball. And at that stage, I was still walking pretty much full time and didn't even realize I was eligible to play wheelchair basketball. So yeah, I came home from London and didn't have a horse to ride, because the horse that I took to London wasn't mine. Sorry, incoming
No,
dogs.
you're fine.
Um, they've just come in from the paddocks with my parents, so they're very excited. Um, yeah, I didn't own the horse that I took to London, and so I didn't have a horse to ride when I got back to Australia. And I did about probably 6 weeks of being a normal uni student, and just went, I'm bored as hell. I can't do this. So yeah, I started playing basketball pretty much for sort of, I guess, shits and giggles, and to have a bit of fun with sport after being in such an intensely, um, you know, uh, competitive situation. So I was like, oh yeah, let's go do it for a bit of fun and just to enjoy sport for the sake of sport, and to play a team sport for the first time in my life. And yeah, I found myself playing women's national league about 6 months later, just as a rookie and a developing player. And yeah, I kind of went from there.
That sounds like like a whirlwind of a ride right there, going from
Yeah.
riding horses to playing wheelchair basketball, and then 6 months in, you're doing so great.
Yeah, it was a very distinct 180 in the sports career. And definitely not one I ever saw myself doing. But yeah, I can't say I regret it.
Oh, I'm sure not, especially since now you get, like you said, you get to travel with your partner and you're professionally doing it. I mean, that's not a lot of people get to do that. That's really awesome.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been good. No complaints.
And I think it's really interesting that like you started out with riding horses and competitively, and then you just like you said, it was like a coincidence of your parents being at a bar watching some stuff and the guy walking over. I mean, that's an awesome story.
Yeah, yeah, it's always a fun one to tell people like, oh, how did you end up in basketball? Well, it's a bit of a random one, but yeah, recruited by my parents.
So I guess you got to pay them some recruiting fees, huh? They get some percentage, maybe.
Yeah, they get the joy of having the excuse to go on on holidays. Is I think about all they get really out of it. Unfortunately, they've had the joys of having three rather sporty children, so they've been dragged around the country quite a bit with horses and athletics and rugby and a few other things that we all kind of played either seriously or semi-seriously. So yeah, they've been very sport active parents for a very long time. So they're enjoying not having to be quite as hands-on anymore.
I'm sure they love every second of it, though.
They do, yeah. They're very much enjoying being Nanny and Poppy at the grandkids sports now.
That's fantastic. Um, so how did you get in? So when we talked about you starting wheelchair basketball, but I'm really curious, like how you got into riding horses. And it sounds like you said you went to Olympics too, correct?
Yeah. I went to London 2012 for para equestrian. I actually grew up horse riding. I live on property. My two older brothers and my mum all horse rode when I was born, so it was pretty natural for me to start having pony rides either in front of my mum or my brothers from about the age of 4 months old. And yeah, I learned to ride before I learned to walk. um, so it was actually the horse riding eventually gave me the strength to actually start walking. So I was riding on my own by the time I was 2, when I started walking just before I was 3. Started pony club at 4 with my brothers and did that competitively with able-bodied kids, which was really cool for me because no one knew I was disabled until I got off my horse. Um, got into para equestrian at the minimum age of 12, which is for equestrian, that's the lowest you're allowed to be classified is 12. And went to nationals the following year, and got selected onto the Australian squad. I was the youngest person on the squad at 13 because there is no junior squad in Australia. It's just open. So and that hasn't changed in in 20 years. There's still no junior squad in Australia. It's just if you're selected, you're in the open adults. And then yeah, I was lucky enough to be selected to go to my first international the following year in 2006. I think I just turned 14, and we did a 3-week stint in the UK where we rode borrowed horses and did 3 competitions. So I did my first adult international, my first juniors international, and then went back and did the UK just national classes as well. And that kind of lit the fire, along with obviously Sydney Paralympics. I was 8 when they came around, and that was my first sort of exposure to parasport. And I was very lucky to meet one of the Australian athletes in Equestrian a couple of months beforehand and visit her at her farm with her horses, and then got to watch her win a double gold. And that was kind of where I was like, oh, I want to do this. And, being 8, my mom was like, yeah, sure, you can do that. And then, yeah, obviously, I kept kind of competing all the way through. I missed out on 2008 Paralympics because of the equine flu in Australia, cancelled the last Australian qualifier, which was the only one that I was actually old enough to compete in. Um, so for Paralympic equestrian, you have to be 16 or in the year of your 16th birthday, which for me was 2008. And the last qualifier was in January, which was the first one that was in the year of my 16th birthday, and it got cancelled because of equine flu hitting Australia. So I missed out on that. I was, I think, second reserve or third reserve for the following Worlds in 2010, and then got really lucky with London that I had a sponsor come on board to purchase the horse for me. We got her 9 months before the games, so it was a really quick turnaround to build a relationship. And I think I got her 6 weeks before the first qualifying event, so like it was a really quick turnaround to make sure we could get the scores and get the selection criteria. And yeah, I rode her all the way up until London. London went absolutely pear-shaped for me. My horse got sick on the way over. I ended up in hospital 2 days before the opening ceremony with a really severe kidney infection. So we were both struggling pretty hard through the competition, and obviously didn't produce our best work. But that obviously kind of lit the fire to go back and try again, just in what I thought was going to be equestrian, and then turned out not to be equestrian. Yeah, so I grew up with horses. I retired officially from horse riding in 2017 when I moved states. And yeah, went straight to being a pure basketballer, but I did dual sport for about 4 years.
You are amazing. That's a lot. You're very accomplished too.
Yeah, it's been a weird one. Obviously, like I'm 20 years into being an elite athlete this year, and it's kind of just like, oh man, you don't kind of realize it when you're doing it because you're young and dumb, and it's just you're so focused on what you're doing. And then you get to I'm now 32, and I'm just like, oh man, I really need to slow down a little bit and start prioritizing stuff a bit more, because trying to do everything at once is just not a doable thing anymore. But the body does not bounce back as much as it used to at 18, 19, 20.
That's fair. So it sounds like the wear and tear is taking a little bit of toll, but you got it under control, it sounds like too, though.
Yeah, definitely getting some wear and tear. One of the fun side effects of my disability is that I have subluxation in all my joints, which means that they dislocate frequently. So that's been probably the biggest wear and tear, is that I'm obviously starting to get some arthritis in some of the in some of the joints. So the cold mornings definitely don't suit me anymore. And definitely when I move to Europe and we go through the winter there, I definitely feel it, and I'm very grateful for heated stadiums. Um, but yeah, obviously, like a lot of rehab and prehab, it's always been important, but it's definitely much more important now that I'm past 20, 28, 29, 30. So yeah, I definitely feel it a lot more so not on the everyday, but more so when we do tournaments or camps, and I hit like day 4 5 of a camp or a tournament. I'm just like, oh, I'm a bit sore. I'm a bit tired. Yeah, not quite as springy as we used to be.
I hear you. I'm right there. I'm 30, so I understand exactly where you're coming from. It's not easy to do you have some like methods though that you'd use to kind of recover, especially after like your guys' competitions and games?
Yeah, like obviously when we're away on camp or tour, we do ice bathing. We have a physiologist that travels with us for that. So that's always a part of it on camp or thing. In Europe, obviously ice bathing is not something I'm going to be doing. So more so that comes down to stretching and trigger balling. We take compression boots and arms and hips with us, so we can do some graduated compression recovery stuff. And like when we're traveling with the Oz team for squad and stuff, we've got a physio, so I can get physio done as well if I am really sore or something's gone really really a wire during training. So yeah, I'm pretty lucky in the fact that I'm pretty well supported.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you guys have a physio. Like that's a great asset to have.
Yeah, yeah, we are very lucky to have a physio when we're at camp or on competition. So generally speaking, now I'm just an everyday appointment for maintenance, just a quick tick over for 30 minutes just to make sure everything's a bit loose and working as much as possible.
I mean, that's so good though that you guys have that. Is that standard though for every team, or are you guys just lucky to have like a physio involved with your team?
For our basketball program, it's standard to have a physio travel with us. Yeah.
Okay. Do they also design your like strength and conditioning programs too?
No, so that's generally speaking done by our state-based institutes. So we have like AIS, which is our national institute, which we kind of run under, and then every state has their own state-based institute that's like our classified as our daily training environments. For me, technically, it's QAS, which is Queensland Academy of Sport, but I've just actually moved back to Sydney, so I'm now training with the Swiss program. Um, yeah, my and I'm actually also a bit of an oddity in the fact that my S&C coach was former QAS program based at my university, and he's now left, but I stayed with him privately because he's been my coach for 6 years now, and we just got a really good relationship, and he knows my body really well, so we've just stayed on privately. But yeah, most of them are run through the state-based organizations, have their own strength and conditioning that obviously see the athletes 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week, and run their strength and conditioning programs through there.
No, that's great. Especially, I can understand how important that relationship is, especially like him knowing everything about you, what's going on, what your history is. That it's really good you have that.
Yeah, he's very, very handy to have on board.
You're talking about like a little bit of your disability with like having some joint subluxations and stuff like that. Does that kind of help you be? Are you really good at kind of mitigating risk when it comes to like competitions and things like that? And how did you juggle that along with like riding horses?
Yeah, so I started, I've always had subluxation in my right leg, in my ankle and my knee, because that's my weaker leg and the one that was more damaged from birth. And then when I hit puberty, it started happening in every moving joint. So toes, ankles, knees, hips, fingers, wrists, shoulder, jaw, and ribs. So and it very occasionally my elbows, but my elbows are actually thankfully one of the more secure ones. So because those definitely hurt. Obviously, we did try to mitigate it as much as possible. With horse riding, obviously it was knees, ankles, hips more than anything. I did occasionally do a shoulder when like I got an awkward moment in balance and got a bit jolted around. With basketball, obviously it's more the fingers, wrists, shoulders, ribs, because I wear a 4-inch gut strap around my stomach to keep me upright and help me stay upright. So if I fall occasionally, it pops up under my rib cage, and my floating ribs tend to disappear for a moment. Yeah, mainly for basketball, it is my shoulders because 20 years of horse riding, I instinctively tuck and roll. So I'm pretty much always landing on my shoulder if I'm going out. So obviously, there's been a lot of rehab work around my shoulders and keeping them strong. I am currently dealing with a flare up of an old injury that's actually from a car accident. I got hit head on in 2016, and thankfully the rubberiness of me actually saved me a lot of problems. But I dislocated my collarbone pretty much all the way over the back of my shoulder instead of breaking it, which is a much better option when you're in a wheelchair, because obviously broken collarbone, you're in a sling for 8 weeks, and that's not something that you can do in a wheelchair. But I did a grade 2, 3 tear on my AC joint, which healed, but not well, because obviously again it's supposed to be in a sling for 6 to 8 weeks. But I just had mine in severe taping for about 10 to 12 weeks to try and keep it as immobile as possible. So just every now and again I land on it badly and it flares up. So it's currently in tape at the moment, and we're babying it through the next couple of weeks just to make sure that it doesn't flare up. badly. So yeah, the joys.
Man, you were going for your life's a wild ride, huh? In a good
Yes.
way. Well, I'm
Yes, it
glad
definitely
nothing
is.
seriously happened, you know.
No, I'm very glad. When I felt it go, I was just like, oh no, not anything but that. But yeah, thankfully it has settled down pretty comfortably, so it's just a little twingy, but we're gonna be overcautious with it.
No, that's fair. I can't blame you. I'd be the same way, especially when it comes to injuries and things like that. And like you said, it's important because you can't have your shoulder in a sling because how are you going to roll the wheelchair and things like that. So,
Yeah. Yeah. But the emergency doctors were very confused as to how they were going to treat that one.
oh, I'm sure I
They're
would be
just
too.
like, uh. They're like, whenever you're not in your chair and just lying around, please put it in the sling. Otherwise, just use the tape. And we're like, okay, no worries. We can do that.
So, given all of your athletic endeavors, has there ever been like a special moment that like just really is kind of brings a smile to your face every time you think about it, or maybe it's something you think about if you're having like a bad day or a bad game?
Um, I think the two that really stand out to me was probably my first international in the UK. And the two moments that kind of really hit home was riding into the arena under lights because we competed at night. And having all the flags flying around the arena and that sort of thing. It was just kind of my first time in that atmosphere, and it was just like, whoa. It was kind of it was weird. It kind of hadn't really hit me. I think just being 14, it was just like, oh yeah, like this is going to be a fun competition. And then obviously riding in under lights, and having my name announced and having, my country's flag on my saddlecloth and on my jacket kind of hit me then. I was like, oh, I'm actually doing this. Um, and I think the other one for me was probably Commonwealth Games a couple of years back in Birmingham, winning my first senior international medal felt really good. But it was also just the fact that we got to compete against so many different countries, but also we got to interact with the able-bodied 3x3 guys and get to know them a little better, and they got to know our sport a bit better, and they've actually stayed really strong supporters over the last couple of years, which has been cool. So yeah, that's probably the two that hit home the most for me.
What was that moment like the first time you rode into that arena under lights?
I think it was funny because it hadn't hit me, but it had hit my mom, and my mom was my groom, so she was like walking in with me, holding the horse's reins as I like went in the gate, and I could like feel her getting stressed about it. And I think I was very blasé about it because I was just like, it's the same arena, mom. Like it's the same test. I've ridden it for 5 years now. Like I'm used to it. And she's just like, yeah, but and I was just like, yeah, I understand. And yeah, I think that kind of it didn't hit me until, like I said, it didn't hit me until later that I was like, oh, like that was actually a really big moment for me. Because again, you're 14, you're young and you're dumb and you don't really think about it. Um, but I think yeah, later it hit later during like the presentation and like hearing I won the junior section of it. So like hearing the Australian national anthem playing like while you're on your horse and like doing the lap of honor and all that sort of stuff was kind of just like, oh yeah, like this it sort of it was weird, like it reinforced that I was like, yeah, this is what I want, like this is what I want to do in life, like this is the feeling that I want to keep. So yeah, that's probably where it stuck out the most.
That's awesome. Especially you get to experience that at a young age. I bet that was incredible.
Definitely, yeah. It was funny, like, because we've been moving around so much, we've been digging out all the stuff out of storage and whatnot, and like some of the old photos popped up, and I was just like, oh, I was such a baby. I was just like, oh, again, like it doesn't hit you when you're 14, but like looking back and you're like, oh man, I was really young. And yeah, I don't think I appreciated it enough at the time, but again, looking back, I definitely do. And it was a crazy thing to do at 14. And I was lucky to have a couple of juniors on that trip with me. That I ended up going to London with one of them. So, and I'm still pretty good friends with the other two still. So, yeah, it's one of those things that it's very much an integral part of who I am as a person now, but at the time it was just like, oh yay, this is a fun experience.
Oh, I bet. I bet it was amazing. And it sounds like it really kind of shaped your athletic journey and kind of your athletic spirit as well.
Yeah, I think it's a weird one because I was actually joking about this to one of my other teammates for basketball a couple of weeks back. I'm not a naturally athletic person. Um, I'm not in. I don't have a naturally athletic bone in my body. I'm just really competitive and stubborn about it. Um, and I think particularly with basketball, like I didn't have any hand-eye coordination. Like I didn't have any natural talent for the game. I just really enjoyed playing it and very competitive as a natural setting. Whereas I think like with horses, like I grew up in it and it was an integral part of who I was. And it was very much a part of my identity until I stopped. And people, even now are just like, "Oh, do you miss it?" And you're like, "Well, yeah, of course I miss it." But I don't miss the competing as much as I miss just hanging out on the farm with the horses, sort of thing. So it's one of those things where it was very much a part of my identity. It was very much a part of shaping who I was, and it still is. Like as I said, I'm a full-time athlete. I've got 2 uni degrees that I haven't put into practice yet. Um, so all those sorts of things where it is very much sport is very much an integral part of my identity, but I also had to find what my identity was away from sport as well.
So growing up with horses, do you think that was sports more special to you versus wheelchair basketball, or you think they're kind of completely the same?
Um, it's a hard one because obviously they're two very, very different sports. And equestrian is notoriously expensive. And I was definitely not in the tax bracket to be to be at the top end of competition, particularly when it became your riding on your own horse. So when I started competing internationally, it was still borrowed horse competition. So even for world championships and Paralympics, you would go pick out a horse out of a hat, ride it for 4 or 5 days a week, and then go compete. Whereas it slowly started shifting through my career to being you compete on your own horse. Um, which, as I said, for 2012, I was super lucky. I had that sponsor come on board and support me in purchasing the horse because she was well and truly out of my price range and my family's price range. And obviously, like with wheelchair basketball, it is still an expensive sport. You've got your chairs and like all disability equipment, being a niche market, it's they can charge whatever they want. um, so I'm actually really lucky that I'm sponsored by Sunrise Medical, so I get my sports chairs sponsored as part of um, their deal with them. But for a lot of people, that's a massive barrier. But it is also a one-off expense, whereas the horses was very much an ongoing expense. So yeah.
So you're talking about the kind of gear you guys need for wheelchair basketball. Do you mind diving into that and kind of educating us about like what all you need for that sport?
Yes, obviously, you need your frame, which, depending on which brand you go with, that's about $7,000 to $10,000 Australian. And then you're looking at wheels. Wheels are usually about 1,500 a set. Tires are another $100 $200 on top of that, depending on what brand you go with. Bearings and caster wheels. If you're running like ceramic bearings, they're about $200 a set. Caster wheels are usually about $90 a set. And then obviously you've got your spares for everything. Your belts are usually about $200 depending on what kind of belts you use. I use Pelvolocks, which are unfortunately the more expensive version. Um, but they are also very durable. So I'm been running my set now for nearly 3 years, so you don't have to replace them too often, which is great. Um, but spare wheels, spare axles, all your tools that you need to make sure that your chair is running well. I generally do all my own maintenance along with the help of my partner for anything that my hands can't do. The joys of being a quad is that some things are just far too fiddly or require far too much hand strength for me to do. So that's where Stephen comes in. Yeah, so generally speaking, like my chair, all up with everything, would have been about $25,000. By the time you got all your spares and all your tools and everything in there. So yeah, I don't quite know what that works out to be in American, but dollars. But I think it's about half. I think you're roughly about double the Australian dollars. So yeah, you're still looking at sort of the $12,000 to $15,000 mark for something custom built. Obviously, you have entry level stuff that's a lot lower than that. To get into it, and a lot of the time, like my first couple of years playing, I was playing in other people's old chairs. So I didn't get my first chair until 2015. So I'd been playing 3 years by then, and kind of knew what I wanted and could spend some money on it.
Would you say that can sometimes be a barrier for people to get involved in sport athletics like that, just because of the
Absolutely.
pricing and stuff?
Absolutely. As I said, I was super lucky to have 2, 3 teammates in Sydney that were of a similar size and similar disability when I started, so that I could borrow chairs off them to kind of play and compete. And I was also super lucky. My first chair came from Wheelchair Sports New South Wales as a loan chair. Um, so I played, I think, almost my entire first season in that, which was just a quickie all court that's adjustable, and you can move in and out and up and down and all that sort of stuff. So there's definitely cheaper options out, but yeah, cost of equipment and like access to facilities and training is absolutely a massive barrier when it comes to any sort of parasport.
I gotcha. Yeah, I'm just curious. I was curious about that because I know some people might use that as like a reason to not get involved in athletics, especially when we know how great the community is for athletics and trying to get people involved and getting people more aware of kind of what you guys have to, because that's something from the outside looking in. I wouldn't think about that. And so I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah. I think that's, again, I've been super lucky in the fact that I had great support here in Sydney, but also when I went to university in Queensland, they had a fully parasport athlete program that was built around having para athletes in uni as well, and they kind of based it off the US college system that they had going there, because the girl that was running it actually went to, oh, I'm going to get this wrong, but I think she went to Illinois. um I think she went to, or she did wheelchair basketball in the college system, and basically wanted to replicate that in Australia as part of her PhD program. And it's now super successful. I think the uni now has wheelchair basketball, wheelchair rugby, swimming, para athletics, para triathlon, cycling, all running out of our university. And some of them are now actually contracted Australian sporting hubs as well. So they've built a really impressive program in a very short amount of years, because that only kicked off when I started, so 2017. So they've really built it into something really cool.
Yeah. Is that the only thing you know of that's like that?
As far as the scholarships they offer, as far as I'm aware, it's the only one in Australia that offers multiple parasport scholarships. Some off universities offer some parasport scholarships, but not fully. I think possibly the only other one is also in Queensland, which would be Griffith. But yeah, USC was one of the first universities to do it in Oz, as far as I'm aware.
Okay. That's great that they have programs like that. And I think you were right. I think it is Illinois' university, because I actually just spoke to a wheelchair basketball player from Illinois.
Yeah, I know. I'm not sure. I can't remember if she went to Illinois or Whitewater. That's why I was like, oh, I don't actually remember which one it is that she went to. Um, but it was one of, yeah. She was there for 3, 4 years with a couple of the Australian girls. So they were kind of some of the first Aussies to go over and do the college route. So they were the trailblazers for it, and she's been very much a trailblazer to try and set it up here as well.
That's really great. Are you involved in any? Oh man, I can't speak tonight. I'm so sorry. Are you involved in any other programs, like getting like maybe youth involved in wheelchair basketball?
I'm not currently, but I have been. um, so I did a lot of work with the junior programs in both states, just helping out with camps and training and stuff like that. I'm hoping to be involved in the next round of the under 25 women's program when it comes around for the next World Championships, and help doing some development work there. I'm about to go do some coaching in Indonesia and Timor Leste in August for a couple of weeks, which will be pretty cool. That'll be my first time sort of flying solo as a coach, which will be fun, if not a little bit terrifying. Yeah, so I definitely enjoy the development side of things. And, as I said, I got so lucky with the players and the coaches that I had coming through the ranks that it's definitely something that makes you want to give back for the next generation coming through.
Would you mind elaborating on you going to Indonesia? That sounds like a great opportunity.
I actually went. It's a organization called BSF Asia. So it's the Bali Sports Foundation. And I actually did a tour with them back in, I want to say 2016, which was actually for wheelchair rugby, um, and getting women into sport in Indonesia. So me and two New Zealand girls did a bit of a tour around, and then we ended up playing in Bali, a 4-day competition against one of the Bali's team. Actually, South Korea came over, and then we did like an Australian New Zealand team as well. And so that's kind of how I got introduced to them. And then, yeah, they just sent me a message about a month ago being like, hey, like, this is what we're doing. Would you be interested? Are you free? And I was just like, oh, I'm still competing in Australia in August. So I'll have to check the dates, because we don't finish our finals until like the second week of August. But thankfully, it's the third and fourth weeks, so I'll pretty much go straight from finals to Indonesia for a couple of weeks. And there, I think we're doing like a week of training and then a week of competition. So yeah, it'll be fun, if not a little scary.
It's scary. Why scary? Because it's your first time coaching, or
It's my first time coaching on my own. So
okay.
it'll be a bit of a challenge, I think, but I'm looking forward to it.
It sounds like a great thing. It sounds like it's going to be really fun.
Yeah, hopefully. I think I actually will know some of the players from the AOZ team that happened at AOZ, where they did a composite team of countries that didn't have enough to field a 5-on-5 team, so they put them all together in one team. And that actually ended up being coached by my coach at home. So I got to meet quite a few of those girls. So from what I've heard from him, a couple of those girls will be coming in. So I'll at least know some of the faces.
So, would you mind kind of talking about your first experience when you got involved in wheelchair basketball? Just because kind of continue on, like, you're about to go do some solo coaching, which is great. And you mentioned giving back to the community.
Yeah, I think again it's going back 10 years now. But I started with just basically come and try days. In Sydney, and yeah, basically would rock up with Jerry, who recruited me, and actually my coach that I now have in Queensland was living in Sydney at the time, and they're old friends from playing. So yeah, basically it was just me and a bunch of other people learning how to play basketball, whether it was juniors or newbies like me who had just either been recently injured and were just out of rehab, and just trying things out for a bit of fun, or if it was little kids getting involved. And yeah, it was like a 2-hour session every Saturday. That was, yeah, literally just for a bit of fun and playing around and learning the basics of it. Which, as I said, having no natural hand-eye coordination definitely took me a while to master. And I definitely spent probably the first 4 or 5 months running into walls and chasing balls down that I'd pinged off my wheels or my foot plate. Um, and then, yeah, probably 2, 3 months in, I started joining the women's team that I play for at Sydney Uni, um, and doing training sessions with them once a week, which again was a little bit higher level, obviously, than the development sessions, but it was still very much I was sort of in the corner with the coaches working on the basics and trying to figure it out with I had at that stage 2 other junior players who were also just starting out. So it was kind of the three of us learning while the seniors did, the hard training, because half of our squad at that stage was part of the Paralympic squad or the Australian squad. So they were obviously, going at it hard, whereas we were just kind of in the corner learning the basics. But it was good to watch them. And then obviously, like, we would do like little scrimmages and stuff at the end where they'd get us involved and teach us on the fly as we were going, which is kind of, for me, it's the best way to learn, because I'm a physical kinetic learner. So to be able to do that was really helpful. And, if something happened, they would stop and go, hey, like, this is what happened. This is where you need to be, sort of thing. So it was really easy to pick up having people that were so helpful to do it with.
Yeah, and I think you explained it perfectly too. Like it's easier to be in the moment learning, right? Being that kinesthetic learner. So
Yeah, definitely. And as you were saying, like before, it's that sense of community. I had people from other teams coming up to help me when we did start National League, because I was still very, very green and probably shouldn't have been on a National League court. But yeah, and everyone was so excited to have new players in. So I think that's a really big part of it too, is that it is very much a community that everyone wants to see everyone do better in, regardless of anything else.
yeah, and I like how you say that because I've noticed that, especially on the outside looking in, that the deaf community is just so welcoming and supportive of everybody, even like able-bodied. I was talking to her name's Annika Cassidy, and she was telling me that like even able-bodied people will come and actually play in some of her wheelchair leagues and stuff like that. And I'm like, that's fantastic, and had to see like these communities coming together and just having a good old time.
Yeah, my mom's actually just started playing in the last like 12 months, so she trains with my team when I'm in Europe, which is pretty cool.
Oh,
So
that's
it's
really
it's
awesome.
yeah, it's been nice to share sport again, because obviously we shared horse riding when I was little, so it's been nice to share a court again.
I bet she's fantastic too, just like her daughter.
She's not as sporty and not as competitive as me, but she's enjoying the exercise.
That's that's awesome. Um, so kind of keeping on that community aspect, what advice maybe would you give to someone that really has just had a life change, or not born with a disability, but they just have become, they've had that life change. Would you really encourage them to chase some type of sport or community, and why would you encourage that?
I think it's very much dependent on the person. Obviously, any sort of physical activity is good physical activity, regardless of whether you're able-bodied or have a disability. And as far as I've found in the last, 10 or so years, the parasport community is a really nice one for the large majority of it. So I think that's obviously a really good part of it. If you were sporty before the accident, then obviously you're pre sort of disposi- disposition to want to be active, and obviously then I would absolutely say try as many sports as you can, find one that tickles your fancy and gives you what you had beforehand. So like I know from my partner was able-bodied until he was 13, and he was a rugby league player and an athletics kid who did sprints and stuff like that. So when he came into a wheelchair, basketball was a fairly obvious choice, in the fact that he was, quick and speedy and agile, and it really ticked all those boxes for him as far as the physicality and all that sort of thing came into it. So I think, yeah, it's very much absolutely be active after you've acquired a disability, like just for general health, and for that sense of community and connecting with other people. I think for me, getting into wheelchair rugby in 20, I want to say 15, was really helpful for me, because at that stage my nerve condition was getting worse and I was struggling with day-to-day activities, and the boys were really helpful in being able to be like, oh, hey, have you tried like this gadget, or have you tried doing this, for getting socks on and shoes on, and sort of things like that, where it's very much, yes, it's good for your health, but it's also really good to have people who have been in the same situation, and at different levels of that as well, whereas some of them are new like you and they're still figuring their shit out as well, and then some of them have been doing it for 20 years and know every trick in the book. So I think that is a really important part of it as well.
You think it's also helpful to be around people that are, similar to you and can understand what you're going through?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's different because I grew up disabled and I've always known that I was disabled. And I didn't ever grow up around someone with a disability until I was in high school, pretty much. The only time I saw kids with a disability was when I was in hospital. I had a very different experience to it, but definitely as I got older and as I acquired another disability that I never thought I would have, that sense of community was definitely a huge part of it. And yeah, being able to bounce ideas off people and, being able to, I'd never had to deal with pressure sores before, and I'd never had to deal with, those sort of things before. So having people being like, oh, you can use this dressing and it's waterproof and it's this and it's that and it won't rub off in your chair, sort of thing, was definitely super helpful.
So we mentioned, you're gonna do some coaching and stuff like that, but are there other ways you really hope to give back to the community that's given so much to you?
Look, I think a lot of it is kind of doing what the people did for me. So I currently have chairs going out to other people. So two of my old chairs are in circulation now. One's about to go to a girl in Queensland who's just started playing this year. It's her first year of National League. And she's currently in a club chair, which is absolutely massive on her. So she tried out my current chair while we were up there doing some training and some coaching with them, because they're a regional program. They're about 3 hours outside of Brisbane, which is like the capital city. So they've actually set up a really good regional program up there, which is super cool. So she's actually going to pick up my one of my old chairs in Perth on the other side of the country when they go to play Women's National League there in on the weekend, which was with one of my old Australian teammates, and she's now retired. So I was like, hey man, can I steal it back to give to this girl who kind of needs it? And she was just like, yeah, that's fine, no worries. So yeah, that's a really big part of it. But I also think just like teaching people how to do basic chair maintenance, whether it's on their day chair or their basketball chair, so that they're not reliant on other people, and things like that. I really enjoy, again, having been a student athlete for a really long time, like trying to teach the girls how to manage university and sport has been a fun one. We've definitely got some younger girls coming through that have just started uni or just finishing school, and they're definitely just like, oh God, what do we do? um, I think that's been a really fun part of it as well, kind of helping out away from the court.
Sounds like you're doing a lot of mentorship.
Not a whole heap and not intentionally, but just kind of incidentally how it happened. Yeah, so I do enjoy it. And again, having done 2 degrees in 2 universities while doing 3 different sports, it's definitely a unique perspective to offer.
That's yeah, I can see school's a heavy load. I can understand that, especially playing all the sports that you did and traveling. That's a lot.
Yeah, I think more so my second degree because I was in basketball then, and like I didn't travel as much with horses because it's just not an easy thing to do. Whereas with basketball, you're in and out a lot, whether it's in and out of the state or in and out of the country. So it definitely pushed my time management skills, which are not the greatest at the best of times. So I did teach me to be much more organized than I am naturally disposed to be.
Yeah, I think we all kind of fall short on that one, but oh
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, I did feel very sorry for my professor who was actually from America, and he at the end of our university degree, he had of 15 students, I think 6 of us were elite athletes. So he would just sit down at the beginning of every semester and be like, okay, tell me what competitions, training camps, whatever you have coming up, and we'll work it around the assessments.
Oh, that's really cool. That's awesome he did
So
that.
yeah, he having 6 of us in the program, he definitely, and particularly because ours was obviously a practical program where you have to be there in person to do everything. So and have patients come in for us to muck around with and learn on. So yeah, it was always very much a which weeks are not weeks we can do anything.
Okay, and you mentioned patience. So what was your degree in?
My second degree is prosthetics and orthotics. Yeah, so
All right.
I grew up wearing, AFOs and leg braces, and as I got older, back braces and arm braces and all sorts of things to keep me in one piece. So yeah, it became something that I really wanted to do, pretty much from being a kid, actually. So yeah, that was where I went. So my first one was sport and exercise science, which was kind of just a bit of a filler degree, to be honest, because I didn't want to move away from Sydney, because I finished school because of my birth date. I finished school at 17, so I was just about to get kicked out of the kids' hospital the following year, and just didn't want to be moving states and moving doctors and doing everything all at once. So I stayed in Sydney and did that first degree, and then moved to Queensland after that to do the prosthetics and orthotics.
That's awesome. That's funny you said that about exercise science. I'm like, well, that's my background.
Yeah, so went through and did fully qualified exercise science. I did start my honors and then went, this isn't for me. um, and then went into the P&O.
Okay. Do you think do you think the exercise science degree has kind of helped you with your athletics and then maybe helping train other people as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Because obviously, like, you get all that training around the physiology and around anatomy and understanding how people's bodies go together. And then obviously, like, biomechanics and learning how to move. Not only does it help you assess yourself when you're in the chair, and that's one of the things. Like, I look back at a lot of video and go, "Oh, I'm pushing weird there," or I've through COVID, I retrained my push entirely to be more energy efficient for me. Um, so things like that. It definitely does help. And yeah, particularly when you're looking at newer athletes who aren't as developed in their skill, and sometimes not as comfortable being in a chair yet. And can't fully utilize where they are in their chair yet. It's definitely a very, very handy background to have.
Yeah, especially when you go to your solo coaching here soon.
Yeah.
You'll be ready. You'll be writing training programs on day one.
I don't think I'm going to have the time for training programs. I think it's just going to be get in and put the team together the best we can for the competition.
That's fair. That's fair. I think what's really cool that you mentioned was talking about you retrained your push. Could you kind of elaborate on that? Because that sounds very interesting.
Yeah, so it came up during 2019 qualifiers for Tokyo. And we and then obviously COVID hit and we didn't have any sort of training, and we were living in isolation, and yeah, just obviously like going over video and stuff like that. And I was just like, oh, it's a really ugly push when I get tired. Um, and I was basically like throwing my whole chest into it and doing like a full circle around my wheel, which was just a whole lot of energy wasted. So we ended up putting me on a bungee cord, which was just a really heavy resistance TheraBand attached to a Velcro strap and attached to a pole, and just sort of training the very much just like one direction parallel push rather than going all the way around the wheel. Like I just straight out, straight in, and try and recover as much sort of momentum and stuff as possible without any sort of excess movement, and just really make it a linear movement rather than any sort of deviation away from that. And then pretty much take my chest out of it entirely. So I wasn't throwing my head and shoulders into every push. It was just shoulder blades and activating through there. And it's definitely helped. I can definitely push for a lot longer, a lot more comfortably now. And obviously having that really linear motion reduces my injury risk as well with my very dodgy shoulders. So yeah, so we spent about probably 2-3 months just in isolation doing that, for 10-15 minutes every session, just practicing that particular push against resistance, just so that I got it into my head and really made it a just a proprioceptive thing, so I could correct on the fly as well if I felt myself sort of drifting away from where I should be.
Yeah, and that's a hard thing to become aware of too, is realizing you're falling back into like a old technique that you're so used to.
Definitely. And, even now, like, as I said, getting older, and that, you know, fifth, sixth day of competition, I definitely feel myself getting some of the bad habits back. I'm like, oh no, stay tight, stay tight, stay tight.
I can understand that. Are there any other like little tips or tricks you also like created or learned or relearned during that time of isolation?
Not so much during isolation, but obviously, like, as you go through playing, you get your own little routines, whether it's free throw or pre-game or whatever it is, or halftime. Like, I've developed those routines over over 20 years now, and a lot of them did transfer to horses. And then some of them didn't, because obviously team versus individual sports. There was factors that you had to trade in and out for that. But yeah, I'm very much, there are certain things that have to happen before a free throw. There are certain, I have trigger words, and I breathe like through my free throws so that I know that I'm stable. Um, I absolutely have pre-game routines, that, you know, I'm not in my chair any more than 30 minutes before a game, because I know that that's going to be painful when it comes to the fourth quarter if I've been in my chair for too long. You know, some girls get in an hour before and are doing shots and doing all that sort of work, but that's not something I can do fatigue wise or pain management wise. You know, I've got to stretch, I've got to put my skins on, I've got to put my put my anti-inflammatory gel on. I've got to take my supplements, to make sure that I've got, you know, my energy gels or my caffeine gels, available on the bench, and all those sorts of things. So a lot of it is just routine, and yeah, it is building good habits in training a lot of the time as well. So it's automatic when you do get to a game that you don't have to think about it. It's just ingrained.
Have you refined that over time during all these competitions as you've kind of gotten further and further in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, we practice game day stuff in training as well, so that, you know, you are tired. What do you have to say to yourself when you're fatigued and lining up for a free throw that might be, you know, end a game and it's important to make, and things like that. What are your reminders? You know, same with shots and layups. Like, again, fatigue, shooting under fatigue, so you have those trigger words always floating around in your head so that you know they're there. um and we had a really fun one for a couple of years, and I still use it even now just to keep myself relaxed and thing. And you know, you'll, if you ever see me at a game, 9 out of 10 times I'm humming some stupid song, just because that's how my brain keeps its serotonin and dopamine working. So um, for a good few years, and I still do it even now. Free throws, if I'm stressed, I'll be singing the chicken wing song, you know, chicken wing, just to make sure that my elbows stay in, so that I don't skew my arms out. But you'll hear me humming ridiculous songs all the time just because they get stuck in my head, and that works for me. So I think for the entire Paralympic qualifiers, I had the Super Mario Kart theme tune in my head, and I was humming it on court the entire time we were playing, like in any sort of dead time.
That's fascinating that you like hum during playing or like the little downtime. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird one. But yeah, it was something I picked up with horse riding, and it just kind of stayed, because it's, yeah, music is relaxing for me. So yeah, not all the time, depending on what irritating song gets stuck in my head. But I was definitely very sick of Mario Kart by the end of Thailand, having it floating around in my head for 10 days. That was definitely time for a new hyperfixation. But yeah, it's just a habit that's come through from horse riding, and I've kept it.
Yeah, but it works too. And like you said, it's kind of part of your like ritual, and it keeps you calm and ready to go, which is, important.
Yeah. Yeah, it does also occasionally very much weird out opponents, because they're just like, "Why are you singing on court?" You're just like, "I don't know, I just am."
So it's the accidental like mental fatigue you give them too. They're like, "What?" And you're like, "Yeah, you're already not thinking about the game. I'm winning."
It's like not intentional psychological warfare, but yeah.
Just a tad bit. Do you have kind of a go-to prep song before games, or is it just kind of whatever's stuck in your head at the time?
Yeah, it's usually very much whatever the current current thing floating around in my head is. It's been stuck on there. Joys of being ADHD is there's always at least one song that's been stuck in my head on repeat for the last days or weeks. So yeah, it very much changes from from game to game what's floating around. But yeah, there are definitely repeat offenders in there, but yeah, it's usually a very random selection. And one of the reasons that my iPod does not go on speakers.
What's your kind of choice of music?
Generally speaking, anything with a good beat. I'm not really fussy about what it is, just as long as it's got something upbeat and like that I can sort of in a weird way zone out to and just kind of set my body to that rhythm. Um, and then yeah, go from there. So can't be anything too chill because otherwise I'll be going to sleep.
That's fair. I can understand. I can see that. Um, you mentioned that you do like a little bit of breathing drills for your free throws. Do you do that as well before the games? Kind of get everything prepped and ready, or
Again, it depends on how I'm feeling before the games. It's a weird one for me where I get excited, but I don't really feel a lot of nerves because like I really enjoy competing. Like that's the reward for training, is that you get to compete. So I actually really enjoy it and don't feel a whole lot of stress around it. But yeah, it definitely like obviously big games like qualifiers and things like that where it's important to win and it's important to perform. Definitely there are some times where you're just like, oh, take a deep breath. Um, and particularly for me, breathing became really important probably about 10 years ago. When I started having tetanic seizures. So they are physiological seizures caused by hyperventilation. Um, so because my diaphragm is partially paralyzed, plus I've got my solid gut strap on, I can't actually a lot of the time get a full breath in um, when I'm playing. So breathing became a lot more important when I decided that I didn't really want to be seizuring after every game, and I take supplements for it now, which has obviously helped that incidents come down a lot more. But yeah, basically I was breathing too quickly and getting rid of too much carbon dioxide, which would drop my calcium levels in my cells, and then my potassium calcium channels would stop working, and everything would freak out. So breathing became really important, and so pretty much anytime you see a timeout or you see a stop and play, you'll see me starting to take big deep breaths and like really stretch up and sort of expand my chest as much as possible, just so that I am getting that oxygen exchange as much as possible when I can.
that's wild. What was
Yeah.
it? What was your first experience like that when you found that out?
It took a while to actually get diagnosed. We originally thought it was a nerve problem with my nerves misfiring, because obviously I had quite a bit of reconstructive work done internally as a kid. And the working theory for about 3-4 years was that some of those nerves had grown back but didn't have anywhere to attach into, because the tissue was no longer there. And that was them just kind of randomly firing and trying to connect to something, was kind of the working theory for about 3-4 years. Um, and then it obviously started to become more serious when I started playing more minutes internationally, and I was under more extreme workloads while we were away, and I was seizuring obviously a lot more often while we were away, which was quite a concern to the national team. As much as it's not a neurological seizure, I'm still very much awake and aware of what's going on and all that sort of stuff. But obviously physically they were quite concerned about it. And at that stage I had changed neurologists and we were chatting about it. And he was a really old school guy, like got his medical degree in the 50s. Still had the leather doctor's bag and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, he literally, his first question was just like, oh, where do your hands end up? And I was like, I don't know, man. I was like, I think in my chest, like under my chin. He's like, oh yeah, that's tetany, like same as tetanus. It's the same family. He's like, yeah, it's tetanic seizures. He's like, just take calcium. And I was just like, oh, okay, that's a much easier fix than what I was what I was hoping for. Yeah, so I take calcium supplements now before I play, and I've gone from, having seizures nearly every competition to having them like maybe once every 6 to 8 months, which is great. Much easier and much nicer on the body. But yeah, it was definitely a weird one trying to figure out why I would be, suddenly dropping down to the ground after games, because yeah, we, went through, is it blood pressure, is it epilepsy, is it what is it exactly? And they're like, everything's clear, like you don't have anything wrong with you. With you, you're a reasonably healthy human being for what your disability is. So yeah, it was very random, where he's just like, oh yeah, just take calcium. You're like, oh, that's an easy fix, cool. I can do that.
Isn't it? The, it's so ironic sometimes how like you have these big symptoms, stuff that's going on, and then you just have someone come in. Oh no, it's just do this and you'll be fine, and it's so simple.
Yeah, it's literally take calcium and breathe. And you're just like, cool, I can do that.
Yeah. After what was it months or something before you finally saw him, or and you got
Oh
that
no,
answer?
that was like years in. Like that was when I moved to Queensland, so 2017, and I got that diagnosis in 2019. So it's only been like the last couple of years that it's actually been under control.
Man, I mean, I'm really glad you got it under control. That's good, but like I said, it's just it can sometimes be funny how like it's just a simple solution. And you're like, oh, geez.
Yeah, like I was expecting like, medication or some sort of treatments, and then, just calcium and remember to breathe properly.
Man, I love it. That's um, I'd really love to circle back because I think it's really interesting is that you also have a degree in with prosthetics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Could you kind of explain how you kind of got started on that? And I asked that because I saw some videos of you on your Instagram of you actually using a form of prosthetics and standing up and like traversing with those.
Yeah, yep. So I got what's called a stance control KFO, so knee ankle foot orthotics, with an electromagnetic knee, a couple of years back now. And then I've just got a normal AFO on my left leg, to help me stand. Part of that was actually to do with work, because I needed to be able to stand and safely machine, while doing the prosthetics and orthotics. So that was the main driving force behind that. I don't have enough, not function. I have enough function, but I don't have enough energy, I guess. I get fatigued really quickly, when I am standing, so it's not something I can do a lot of. And it's not something that's particularly recommended for me now, particularly out of the brace, because my right knee is so unstable. It basically has about, like 20 to 25 degrees of lateral movement while my leg is still facing forward. So pretty much it's hanging on by the skin of its teeth. um, when I'm standing without that brace on. So yeah, I got into it literally because I grew up wearing AFOs on my bad leg, on my club foot from, I think I got my first one at about 5. And was kind of in and out of them all through my childhood and teenage years. And then I kind of stopped wearing them when I started using the chair more full time, because I was just like, well, I'm not walking anymore, so I don't really need the AFO to do anything. But I'd always been interested. That was always what I had wanted to do as a job. And it's kind of cool, particularly in the prosthetics and orthotics field, we're actually getting a lot more end users become practitioners. So there are a lot more amputees who are actually doing prosthetics. There are a lot more people using orthotics that are assessing, prescribing, manufacturing orthotics for people now. So I think that's really cool, because we can sort of address some of the things that worry the patients in a much more personal way, rather than going, oh well, this is what the literature says. It's like, well, no, this is the lived experience in it. And then yeah, obviously when I got into the P&O stuff, I realized I had to stand to do machine work. And that was kind of where the KFO came into plan. to make sure that I could safely stand in machine and produce stuff. My poor teacher from uni definitely had a few hair raising moments where my knees did give out, and you would see me sort of disappear in the machine room. And it's a glass wall between the two classrooms, so he would just kind of see me duck out of view, and he'd be like, "Oh shit." um, so that was kind of where the KFO came from. It wasn't really from a functional, like, walk, let's get back to walking thing. It was more, let's just be able to stand safely and move around a workshop safely. And it's cool because you can switch the knee on and off, so it can just be like a free swinging brace, or you can turn the electromagnetic knee on, and it just holds me steady and upright. Basically, I can't buckle through it at all. So, but it's because it stands control. If I do walk normally, it actually, the knee unlocks and locks as you swing. So once you get into hip extension, the knee unlocks, you can swing it through like a normal leg. Once you put your heel down, it locks out again, and then you walk over it. So it's very cool, and it's a very nice piece of technology that I'm very happy to have, and don't use nearly as much as I should. But yeah, that was pretty much it. I got that particular brace just so that I could use it when I do actually retire and get into a fully working job.
I got you. And those things are so fascinating too. Like you said, it's got the electromatics and how it can unlock and lock as you walk. I mean, that's really awesome.
It is super cool. It took me about 4 months of physio to actually get the hip extension required to be eligible for it. It was quite funny because I got that brace through an orthotics company that I actually did placement with for 8 weeks during my degree. Um, and the managing director was just like, "You're never gonna," because I was like, this is what I want to do. And he's like, "You're never going to get the hip extension." He's like, "You're rotated the wrong way. Like, your hip's really tight. Like, you're just not going to be able to get it, because you have to have minimum 20 degrees of hip extension." And I think when I was there, I was like basically at zero. I could get my leg to straight, and that was about it. So he's just like, "You're not going to get 20 degrees of extension out of your hip." But then, yeah, I came back, I think just after COVID, to do the original assessment. He was like, "Well, I'll be damned." He's like, "You've got it. It's there." It's like, it's functional. We can make it work. So yeah, and then just obviously had to do a couple of readjustments. I unfortunately lost quite a bit of weight in between the original casting and then the first fitting, so it was way out, and they had to go back and adjust all the molds down to the new size, which is like, "Oh, sorry, didn't mean to do that intentionally." um so yeah, but I'm, yeah, super lucky to have that, and it's a super useful piece of equipment to have when I do need to be up and about on my feet and still be safe.
Yeah, that's good. Like you said, especially it sounds like you got some future plans one of these days that's where you'll be working in the workshop. So you have them.
Yeah, that's it. That was very much the original plan behind it. Was, yeah, I need it to be able to stand and safely machine and not, end up with my face in a grinder or something. Was very much the big safety concern behind it. Was I didn't particularly want to lose any more limbs or skin to any sort of machinery. That if I, did have a fall, at least this way, the only way I can fall is sideways, which will almost 10 out of 10 times be away from the machinery. So um and this brace is small enough that I can still actually sit in my chair with it, so I don't have to be on my feet full time as well, which is another bonus.
Yeah, that's perfect. Like you said, you can get in and out and it doesn't take up all that room. Was So were you able to, like as a child, use braces and stand, correct?
I walked full time until I was about 16, 17. I Yeah, despite not having the bottom part of my spine and having a club foot, I was actually pretty active. I walked, yeah, full time, other than when I obviously had surgeries on my feet and on my back. But yeah, I walked, ran, did everything on my feet until yeah, probably 15, 16, when I got that a tertiary condition, and that affected the nerves conduction and stuff like that, and I started having more trouble with fatigue, but also just coordination in general, and movement and function in general. So I started using a chair, yeah, part-time around 16. And then I started using it mostly full time around 2014.
So was there kind of like an extended period where you were mainly using your chair, like you said, full time, and then you get those braces and get to stand for the first time in so long? And if so, how was that?
Like I'm pretty lucky in the fact that, I am still an incomplete quadriplegic, so I can still stand and walk around as needed depending on the day. Um, so I am very lucky in that situation. The braces were more that protective measure, so that as I said, my right knee is hanging on by the skin of its teeth with its ligaments. So that was one of the things, is like I'm not really supposed to weight bear on that leg without the brace because of how much damage it's doing. Um, so that's kind of one of them. And then the other one was just, yeah, that safety of A, offloading my leg, but also B, just making sure that I wasn't going in weird directions and stuff like that. And when the lower leg goes out, then the hip goes out and then the back goes out, and I was just causing a lot of problems for myself. So keeping myself in linear planes on both legs was just also an overall health thing for me. But yeah, like it was really cool when I first got the braces, and like as you said, you've seen the video, I've got a pretty big shit eating grin on my face,
Hmm.
because it was really the first time that I'd stood up in, yeah, like 4, 5, 6 years, where I was really secure and I wasn't having to consciously think about contracting every single muscle that I have in my legs to make sure that I didn't fall over. And I wasn't worried about, a grab rail or, a wall that I can lean on to make sure that I'm not gonna go face first into the ground. So I think that was a really cool part about it, was like I didn't have to compensate to stand up. Like I was just standing. And I could keep my eyes up and not have to look at my feet and wonder where they're going, um, and make sure that they are actually going flat on the floor, and I'm not walking on the sides or with the tops of my feet, which I do occasionally. So yeah, just that like full security of being able to like stand up tall and like look my parents in the eye was really cool. Like being eye, because like me and my mom are the exact same height, so like actually being like eye level with mom again was really really cool, and a really nice moment for the first time in, yeah, 5, 6 years.
Yeah, I was curious, and I appreciate you sharing that and kind of clarifying that for me because I was like, I remember I read the caption, so I was like, well, I'm going to ask about this. I'm very curious. So that's awesome.
Yeah, so I can get up and I can walk around, which is obviously a massive advantage, but I'm not really supposed to.
I can understand that. A lot of us do things we're not supposed to. Whoops.
Yeah, very much so. Pretty sure I've given a few doctors heart attacks over the years, or at least indigestion.
And we'll continue to do so, I'm sure.
Yeah, more than likely.
Um, and you mentioned, kind of circling back to, you were talking about that it seems like there's a lot of, other adaptive individuals getting into prosthetics and helping other adaptives. And I think that's something we should definitely explore because I actually talked to a rock climber recently, and she was telling me her first interaction with her prosthetist was he also was an amputee, and he's the one that helped kind of get her back and stuff like that. And I think that's really good. I'd love to explore that and kind of hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, I think like as I said, it's great to have people who are end users of the product prescribing the product. Um, so I think that's a really big part of it. And whether you are an amputee who's learning how to walk again, whether you are someone who's just had a stroke or a spinal cord injury and you're in orthotics, to stabilize, having someone who's had that lived experience and can go, hey, well, this product worked for me, I think it would work for you. Or just even having those frustration days where you're doing rehab and physio and trying to learn how to use a prosthetic leg or how to learn how to use a full leg brace, just going, ah! Having someone who is been there and done that, and I think is a really helpful part of the physio again, rather than, and that's not saying that able-bodied people aren't fantastic practitioners, they absolutely are. But I think having that lived experience with your practitioner is definitely makes the transition a lot easier as well, to go, oh well, I will get back to work, I will get back to a normal life, I will get back to having a job and a family and whatever else, which can sometimes, particularly with those traumatic accidents be a really hard thing to picture for them. So I think that's a really big part of it too.
Yeah, I think, like you said, having that lived experience, it does account for a lot. And also, you're sharing that experience with another individual that can understand where you're coming from.
That's it. And, we've all either had that thing of having, a prosthetic that didn't quite work or an orthotic that didn't quite fit and just gave you more headaches than it did anything else. So I think that as well, like finding someone who can give you that little bit of inside knowledge to go, hey, it's going to take, 2-3 weeks for this to feel normal. And if it doesn't after that, then come back, rather than, you being a paranoid first time patient going, it's still hurting, like it doesn't feel right. And then again, that able bodied person doesn't have that experience of going, oh, well, like it will wear in, it will feel all right in a couple of weeks. If it doesn't feel all right in a couple of weeks, then come back to us. Or, if it's really severe pain, definitely come back to us. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah, I think
sorry.
no, you're good, and I think you explained it well because like I said, I'm an outsider looking in, right, and my knowledge is limited, and it's really great because now I have a little more understanding because I was talking to her name's Morgan, and she was telling me, she has that personality where she doesn't like to speak up per se, and sometimes you have those. She told me it's like a week-long process sometimes to get it to fit right, and you could get to the end and it doesn't fit, and like you said, you might have someone like, oh, it'll just wear in, versus you have someone that, like you said, the lived experience can sit there and be like, all right, we're just going to redo it, or they might have a better idea of how to tweak it to help you,
Yeah.
to make it more comfortable. Because at the end of the day, comfort is really what you need.
Yeah, and I think particularly with prosthetics, like there's such a big difference in like limb difference and water and all that sort of stuff. So like it's constantly shifting in the limb as to how big and small it is. So every day it's going to fit a little differently. So I think that's definitely something that I don't think gets explained enough to the amputees before they get released from rehab and hospital. Like I know that they go over it, but I don't think it's really explained that yeah, your limb is literally going to be a different size every day, and every day putting your prosthetic on is going to be a different experience because of that. Sometimes you're going to need 4 liners, sometimes you're going to need one, sometimes you're going to need to have to twist it on a certain direction because part of it's swollen and part of it isn't, and things like that. So yeah, I think particularly with prosthetics, it's definitely much more in depth, and having that lived experience, I think, becomes much more relevant.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I never would have known any of that. So especially I can understand the limb changing and swelling, but like you said, it's not common knowledge.
No, it's not, and it does get explained to patients, but I don't think it, again, when you're in that sort of not trauma setting, you're past the trauma setting, but it's not information that I think gets retained a lot because of just the setting they're in, and they've been given so much information all at once that they're just kind of blanketing it all out and just going, oh yeah, cool, I've got it. I just want to go home, sort of thing. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that having that person to reiterate it again and again definitely helps.
Yeah, and like you said, you're going to be one of those people that has a solution. So that's awesome. One day.
Yeah.
So looking forward, because this year is a Paralympic year, are you guys getting ready for that? How are things on that end?
We actually didn't qualify this year, so there'll be no Paris for me, which is a bit sad. But looking forward to, like I said, the national leagues here in Australia. This will be our first full season since pre-COVID, so that's really exciting to have the league back full time, and play a full season. So, like I said, we started last week. We play through to mid-August, which is good for us, and I think a really important part of getting us back on track. And then yeah, looking forward to going back to Europe in September and playing in Germany for another year. And getting 8 months of solid play under my belt there as well.
Wow, I'm really sorry I brought up the Paralympics. I was like, oh.
No, that's all good. It's part and parcel of elite sport, unfortunately. Sometimes stuff doesn't go the way you want it to. And yeah, obviously it was definitely a bit painful, and for me, that was going to be my last Paralympics. So definitely hit a sore spot. But again, it's the reality of elite sport. Sometimes it doesn't go your way. So gotta sit back and refocus and look forward to the next thing.
And that's exactly right, and sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow. Yeah.
It definitely is. Not the first time that we've missed out, but yeah, definitely not a fun one to do. 10 out of 10 don't recommend.
That's fair. I can't say anything, but I can empathize with you on that end. And then, like you said, well, I mean, that's great because, like you said, in September you're going to be playing and traveling in Germany, so that'll be really good.
Yeah, that'll be the next big thing, and then I think we have qualifiers in about 12 months, so we'll look at that for Worlds. Is kind of the next big thing on the cards, and looking at it, it's going to hopefully be my retirement. So.
All right. Well, I wish you the best of luck. Is there, Hannah? Is there a way people can kind of follow your, journey and stuff like that towards going to Germany and things like that?
Yeah, I post most of my stuff on either Instagram or TikTok. And I also have an athlete page on Facebook that's just Hannah Dodd Para Athlete that you can follow along the Australian leagues that are happening now, and then yeah, European leagues when we head back in September.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to watching you on Instagram and TikTok. I'm definitely going to be paying attention.
Hopefully, it's not too boring.
Oh no, not at all. I love watching sports. You guys are incredible. It's really awesome to watch and support you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. We definitely appreciate any support we can get. So.
I love doing it. I'm happy to do it. All right, well, I do appreciate your time tonight. I'm sure you got to get out of here and get, sounds like you might have a rest day before you go training. Again, I appreciate, your time. And, it means a lot to me that you took the time to come on the podcast.
No, thank you so much for having me. I'm always happy to talk about parasport and get it out there in the world. So yeah, very happy to help out.
Awesome. Can't wait to share more stories.
Yeah, thank you. I look forward to them.
Yeah.